Good morning. Thank you so much for attending this seminar. My name is Nick Smith, and this seminar is called Why Good Communication is Vital to Any Relationship, or How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, you might be wondering, well, what is a life coach? And you might be sat there thinking that I sit around in robes and do a lot of chanting and burn incense with people. No, absolutely not the case at all. I define myself as a helper. I help people when they feel that their life is in crisis. Now, when it comes to coaching, crisis can be defined by the gap between where you are and where you want to be. The bigger the gap between these two things, the bigger the crisis we're going to feel. And in terms of where we want to be, that might be down to our job, it might be more money, it might be a healthier, fitter body, but the gap between the two is going to facilitate how much of a crisis that we feel in our lives. And when we reach this point of crisis, we have two options. We can stay the same, and the best part about staying the same is that you have to do absolutely nothing. That's the best thing about it. Absolutely nothing. You might just pick a life of instant gratification, buying the latest iPhone, the latest Apple Watch, the latest Yeezys, handbags, coats, shoes, whatever it is, to provide these little moments of happiness every now and again. And I wonder, how long does each little moment of happiness when you buy the new thing lasts? Just long enough until the latest product comes out? And I always used to wonder why people get so excited about going down the pub on a Friday night, pre-lockdown. Why people count down the seconds to 5 o'clock on a Friday. Why people hate Sunday night because it's the furthest time away until we can go down the pub again to escape our problems for a little while. Legally, illegally, doesn't matter. We just need to escape our minds for a little bit before we go back to the normal. The monotony of just going to work and never really getting anything done. And could you imagine anything worse than waking up as an 80-year-old and thinking, shit, I had the option of doing something with my life as opposed to just going to work every day just so I can pay the bills. And the best part is, we always have options. We just need desire and we need strategy. That's where life coaching comes in. When we face this moment of crisis, we can pick a life of growth instead of staying the same. Instead of spending all our lives whinging, we can pick a life of growth. Only downside to this is, the only snag, is that this does require some work. Like I mentioned, it requires desire, it requires strategy. You need the desire, I'm here to help with the strategy to get you where you want to be. Like we said, if that's to do with something around your job, more money, a healthier body, whatever it is. But bottom line, it does require a bit of work. You might be thinking, well, yeah, that sounds great. All I need is the desire to change, but what makes you so qualified to help me? Excellent question. If you've ever felt like you've been trapped in a hole, that's you just there. And that was me once as well, a long time ago. You are physically trapped in a hole. Who do you want to see appearing at the top? Who do you want to be your saviour, your rescuer? Who's the first person you want to see? Well, let's look at this from a traditional standpoint. Who are the main people that we go to when we need help? Now, when I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety in 2010, when I went back to study for my degree, I felt trapped and I didn't know what to do about it. So I went down the conventional methods. I started off by seeing a doctor. And they said, what are the symptoms? And I said, I'm feeling like this and feeling like this. And they said, okay, well, here's some pills. I said, right, okay, thank you. Are they going to help me get out of this hole that I don't want to be in this hole anymore? How do I get out of it? So take these pills. If you're still feeling like this after your pills have run out, come back, we'll give you some more. I said, are they going to make me feel better? Well, yeah, they'll make you feel better for a bit. Right, okay. So they're not actually going to get me out of this hole. They're just going to make me feel a little bit better for a bit. Okay, thank you. Who else are we going to try? I tried prayer for the first time in my life. I've never been particularly religious, but I thought it's worth a shot. So I started praying, please help me get out of this. Help me to stop feeling like this every day. It's become quite debilitating and I don't want to be down this hole anymore. And that didn't work either. So I tried a therapist. And all they would do is just kind of ask questions, how does that make you feel? And I said, well, I still feel like I'm trapped. I want to get out of it. And before we even kind of got into much, it'd be, time's up. That's your 45 minutes, I'm afraid. Let's try again next week. You think if we're trapped in a hole physically or mentally, these 3 pillars that we've always gone to help us aren't really getting us out of this hole. We are still trapped. Even though we've tried pills, we've tried prayer, and we've had someone listen to our problems, we are still trapped in that hole. So I'll ask you again, who do you want to see? Somebody who knows how to get you out of that hole. Someone who's been down that hole with you and can say, listen, I know exactly what it's like and I know how to get out. So I'm going to show you how to get out. That's what makes me qualified to talk about coaching, to help people get out of the hole that they're trapped in. And when it comes to the holes that we're trapped in, the first thing that I normally discuss with business clients, with private clients, is if there's anything potentially holding us back. Once we know what we want and we know where we want to be, what our future destination is, our life vision, where we see ourselves in 5 years or 10 years, that's all great. We need to know where we're going, but we also need to spend just a little bit of time sometimes figuring out where we've come from, just to see if there's anything holding us back. And again, I know personally, I spent a long time entertaining people, being a clown, always making people laugh. I would sit and write jokes. If I was having a conversation with anyone, friend, stranger, whoever, I would try and shoehorn in jokes as best I could to try and get them to like me. And as I was going through my 20s, I wasn't really that mindful of it until it hit me when I was mid to late 20s. And I used to work in radio. And after a show one day, I was having a cup of tea with my old studio manager. And I said, I just feel a bit burdened. I feel like everywhere I go, people just want me to make them laugh. That's what they expect. And my manager said, well, that's the alter ego that you've created. That's what you want people to see. I said, I know. And I don't know if I like it anymore. I just want people to know me for me. And she said, well, who are you? And I said, I don't know. I know who I don't want to be. I don't know who I am in order to get to where I want to be, though. And that stuck with me. And then as I started going through my late 20s, early 30s, people always relied on me to tell jokes and be the life of the party and be the clown, effectively. And it started to play more and more in my mind that I'm never going to be taken seriously for a promotion, for a pay rise or anything like that. And I would like to be considered, I'm in my mid-30s now, I'd like to be considered as someone who takes their job seriously. And so what I had to do was a little bit of emotional time travel, which is something that we do in cognitive behavioural therapy. We just go back in time to try and figure out where it came from to see if we can make sense of it. So I went back, all the way back, and then a little bit further, all the way back to the 23rd of September 1993. Which just happened to be my 8th birthday. And no one at school, none of my friends wished me a happy birthday because no mobile phones back then, no social media. Kids were just being kids. Rationally, I can look back and not expect anyone, any 8-year-olds, to wish me a happy birthday because how would they have simply known? How could they have possibly known? And so I was sat on my bed that night and my mum came in and she said, oh, you look a bit upset. I said, yeah, no one wished me happy birthday today. And she said, oh, that's really sad. I said, oh no, I'm really sad. She said, I'm so sorry. I said, thank you. No birthday attention for 8-year-old Smith. From that day, I've made people laugh. I've been the clown to get them to like me. So 8-year-old me can have some friends. I would tell jokes at people's expense. I would tell jokes at girlfriends' expenses in the past in front of their friends and their family. We'd get home and they'd say, please don't take the piss out of me in front of my family and in front of my friends. And I'd say, oh, shut up, you know, I got a laugh out of it, so that's all that matters. Not even realising the effect it was having on my relationships. It was that bad because I didn't realise that 8-year-old me got no birthday attention and he just had to do everything he possibly could to get as many friends as possible. And it's only now I can look back and realise and become a lot more rational. Because we can't when we're kids. All we do is just try and string all of these different experiences together to try and get them to make sense, but we don't have the life experience to get them to make sense yet. It's only when we get older we can look back. And that's why a lot of limiting beliefs that we have, some of the ways that we operate, can all sound a bit childish sometimes. When people say, I can't do that, I'm not good enough for that, they sound a bit childish. Why do they sound childish? Because we pick up these beliefs when we're children and we just run with them. For me, I run with this idea for 27 years that I have to make every single person I meet absolutely whack themselves laughing so they'll like me, so 8-year-old me doesn't have to ever be sat on his bed crying again because no one liked him. You might think that's a bit silly, but that's one of the things that we do as a life coach, is just look back to see if there's anything holding us back from where we are to where we want to be. The effect that it has by having this little breakthrough session, by taking a little step back in time, is it can bring about self-awareness. Self-awareness is always going to be the first step towards personal growth. Self-awareness brings responsibility, which means we can start to self-regulate. We can manage it the more aware we are of it. We can own it, which puts us on a path of growth, which means we can be ourselves. We might be able to be ourselves. For my instance, for the first time in 27 years, we can actually be ourselves, unapologetically be ourselves. And if you haven't had this kind of breakthrough through self-awareness and taking responsibility for whatever's holding you back, it's really empowering to be yourself for the first time since you can remember. And this definitely helps us influence other people through setting an example. And all we have to do is figure out who we are, who we want to be, and where we're going. But what is stopping us? Ourselves. You are stopping you from getting what you want. Our brains can be our worst enemies. They can also be our best friends. You just have to figure out which one you want it to be in terms of serving you towards getting you towards where you want to be. But for change to happen, I've mentioned this twice already, the desire to change must be bigger than the desire to stay the same. Things like New Year's resolutions, for example. Why don't we ever stick to them? Because we don't actually want to do them. There's no desire to do them. We write them down because we feel like we should have to. They're negatively motivated. We don't actually want to do it. We don't actually want to go to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning every day. So we will for a couple of days so we can tell all of our friends, oh, I'm doing my New Year's resolutions. I can't believe you've quit yours already. We don't actually want to do it. We don't actually want to be there. So the motivation is slowly going to die out. Because there's no desire. The desire to change must be bigger than the desire to stay the same. That's me, and that's what I do in not that much of a nutshell, actually, so I apologise. Because this is all about you. All about communication. Now, with professional clients, private clients, I always ask, what's the problem? Now, if the problem is based in communication, it might be something like you right now are not knowing where you stand with someone in your life. It might be that you feel like you're bothering people, that you're not feeling understood, you're feeling judged. You feel like you're talking to a wall sometimes when you're talking to someone. That's really annoying. Do you feel like you're bothering other people when you're talking to them? Boring other people, sorry. You wonder sometimes, are they even listening? And that can be really sad and disheartening when we're pouring our little hearts out and the person we're talking to doesn't even look like they're paying attention to us. We think, what's the point? Or we might get angry in that situation instead and we start to argue. And are we arguing too much? Those are the biggest issues that clients come to me with when there's a problem with their communication with someone in their lives. Because that other person they're thinking of, or the person that you're thinking of right now when one of those little ideas came up, is that they fail to appreciate that communication is the foundation to every single relationship that we have. The more effort we put into our communications, the better the foundation is going to be. You know, with your best friends, the communication is good because there's effort. There's effort to sustain that relationship. So if there was a little chink in this structure of our relationship, a little crack started to appear, we know that it's not going to affect the foundations because the foundations are strong. They've been built over time. Whereas when it comes to romantic relationships, for example, you can pretty much pinpoint, if you know what you're looking for, when a relationship is about to go down the pan. Because the communication stops. There's an issue with the communication. Cracks start appearing in our foundation, and if nothing gets done about it, these cracks are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the whole relationship crumbles down around us because the cracks were too big in the foundation to support the structure that was our relationship. And when we struggle with our communications, it prevents us from enjoying life. The quality of life is based on the quality of our relationships. I've got a big handful of friends that I call my 2 a.m. crowd. People that I can call at 2 o'clock in the morning if I've had a bad day, if I've been dumped, if I just want to get things off my chest. And I know they'll answer the phone. And they know, and I know, this is reciprocal. They know they can call me at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. Friends have called me in the past because they just had a really shit time and they just want to talk. And they know that I'll answer the phone to them. And because of these people, I would say that I'm generally quite a happy person, quite grounded, quite generally in a good mood because I know I've got these people behind me. And hopefully they feel exactly the same because they know they've got people behind them as well. I would rather have my half a dozen closest friends than £1 million. And I always grew up wanting £1 million in my bank account. And I often wonder now, if you had the option of a handful of best friends that you've been through so much together with and you love them dearly, or £1 million in your bank account. I always used to wonder, what is happiness? For years I used to think happiness is having all that money in my bank. And the older I get, the more I appreciate, no, it's not. As long as I've got enough to pay my bills, I don't care. I spend more time on my relationships than I do my bank account. Because I appreciate, and we should all appreciate, that communication is a dialogue. But sometimes we listen to reply, not to understand. Stephen Covey said that. He wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. If you ever get a chance to read it, absolutely read it. It's very good, even though my voice is breaking when I talk about it. What that means is that when we listen to reply, not to understand, it means that we're going to struggle to build deep, meaningful connections with other people. Particularly if you ever have to be sat in a coffee shop and you see 2 friends meet for the first time in a little while. They might be just meeting on their lunch break. And it's almost like watching a tennis match. They go, they go, they go, then they go, they go, then they go. And there is no aim to appreciate or understand each other. And so that relationship's always just going to be skin deep. It's always just going to be a breadth of relationship rather than any kind of depth to it. Our aim is to appreciate and understand each other. I always think back to my science teacher who I had for 4 years out of 5 at secondary school or high school. And she would just stand in front of the blackboard and just rattle off the information that was written on it. Never an attempt to help us to understand, never an attempt to show any insight into the material. For 4 years, that person taught me. I don't remember a single thing. Monologues are great. Monologues are wonderful in films, and lecturers do love a monologue, but if there's no attempt to connect, we're never going to have a good relationship with that person. And the point is, we all want connection to add and receive value. I talked about my 2 a.m. crowds. We all want connection. You may have noticed, it's no coincidence that the older we get, the less close friends that we have. Why? Because our time becomes more precious. Because the older we get, the more responsibilities we have. When we're teenagers, we have hundreds of friends. Lots and lots of breadth, not a lot of depth. You might have one or two close friends that you can actually have a proper conversation with, but the vast majority, no. And then into our 20s, when we start to get a few responsibilities, our hundreds of friends have been shrunken down to maybe a few dozen friends, if you're lucky. Not many responsibilities. Then we get into our 30s, and by this point, there's a decent chance you'll have a family, you'll have a mortgage, you'll rent, you'll have other bills, you might have kids. All of these responsibilities that we all have to keep an eye on. So our spare time becomes a lot less the older we get because of the more responsibilities that we have. And we don't want to waste our spare time because it is precious. And so the only people we have in our lives with the more responsibilities that we have are just the people that we want in it. The people where we feel we add value into their lives, and hopefully they feel like we add value into theirs. But sometimes we put up blocks to our communication and we choose disconnection. So that's the first thing that we're going to be talking about today. Blocks to communication. Then we're going to have a look at misunderstanding, and then perception, and then building relationships, and then effective listening. Firstly though, we are going to play bingo. Slightly different to conventional bingo. I'm still not overly sure about the graphics. I tried to make it look like a cheesy kind of 60s, 70s quiz show game. I thought it was funny. I still don't know if it's funny or not, but there we are. Slightly different to normal bingo, like I said. Put your dabbers, dobbers, whatever they're called, away. That's not what we're going to be doing here. What I am going to be doing is putting a few words on the board that are blocks to effective communication. And all I want you to do is to think about the effects that some of these blocks that you have experienced in your life have had on you and in a relationship that you've had. Now, this can be with someone at work, someone at home, one of your friends, whomever. And if you haven't been on the receiving end of any of these, if you've been guilty of putting up a block to communication, you're not a bad person. But all I want you to do is maybe just have a little think about what effect that block could have had to the person that you were talking with or communicating with. And if you really have to help with your self-awareness, flip the situation around and put yourself in their shoes for a second. Okay? Let's go. Give you a few seconds to scan around the board. One or two of those are lighting up for you right now. And you're thinking about someone in particular. And you're thinking about how that relationship could be better if they just stopped doing one of those things. Have we ever talked to them about it? How good are our foundations? How good is our communication with that person? The foundation's strong enough that we can say, listen, I don't appreciate when you do this. It's really putting a block to our communication. As such, putting a block to our relationship. We're never going to have a meaningful, deep relationship if one of these blocks exists. My favourites, being judged, someone who's always advising me, someone always giving solutions. Now, sometimes we think we're being really helpful when people come to us with problems and they'll say, well, no, I'm not happy about this, and we'll say, we'll do that then. And they'll say, I'm not happy about that, and we'll say, we'll do that then. Sometimes people just want to feel like they're being listened to. They want to feel valuable within themselves. Because more often than not, they already probably know what they're going to do about that situation. They just want to get it off their chest. They're confiding in you because they feel like your relationship is good enough that they can be completely honest and have this deep conversation with you about whatever is troubling them. These are the main issues when it comes to blocks to effective communication. You know full well, if you've been on the receiving end of 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, the effect it's had on that relationship with the person you're thinking of right now. And like I said, if you are guilty of 1 or 2 of these things, that's okay. Self-awareness is always the first step towards personal growth. But I'll ask you, if you are a manager, a supervisor, a leader of people, whomever it is, and you are guilty of 1 or 2 of these blocks to communication, like I said, you're not a bad person, but all I want you to do is consider what effect does it have when you are in charge, when you do have people looking up to you. And I'll ask you, is it better to be feared or trusted by the people you work with? If you don't have the relationships with people that you want, why? Do you want people to be scared of you? I've never understood this. I've seen this happen. I've spent nearly 10 years now working on building sites. Alpha male territory. And people want to be feared, and I don't get it. Is it because they were scared of their boss? Because they were scared of their boss? And all the way back to what, the Industrial Revolution? How's that working out for you? Do you have the relationships that you want? Or is it you don't want people to come too close to you because you might end up having a deep connection with you and you don't really know who you are? So the idea of having someone else try and get close to who you are when you don't know who you are is just too scary, so we're not going to bother. We'd rather just have them fear us, even though that's not actually what we really want. What do we really want? We really want connection with people. But self-awareness is always going to be the first step towards personal growth. When it comes to your self-awareness, I'll ask you some questions. How well do you listen to others? Are you aware of what someone might be implying? Can you pick up on what's not being said? How about how you process what you hear? Do you remember what people tell you? Do you keep track of points? Do you summarize where appropriate? What about how well you respond? Verbally? Non-verbally? Do you nod your head when someone's talking to you to show that you are actually listening? Do you ask follow-up questions? How's your body language? Is body language important when we're communicating? Well, surely it's just the words, isn't it? Is it? Is it? If we look at the Moravian model, it's not what you say, but how you say it. Less than 10% of our communication is down to what we say. The two higher percentages concern our tonality, which is how we say what we want to say, and our physiology, how we carry ourselves, our body language. That is quite an imbalance, 7, 38 and 55. If we're looking to have more impact with people in our lives, we need to try and balance these three out a little bit more. You might be thinking, well, I'm still not overly sold, to be honest. I just talk the way I talk, Think, okay. But our tonality dictates how we're perceived. If we tone up when we're asking someone a question, it sounds like we're genuinely interested in them. If we have no tone at all when we're talking, we sound a bit boring and uninterested. And imagine if I was to give you a monologue and do the whole presentation. How long would you take to switch off? I've already switched off and I'm the one doing the talking. What about if we start to tone down, like the way we talk to the kids sometimes, or the dogs, or people we work with, because we earn more money than you, I'm higher up the ladder than you, so I'm going to talk down to you because I've earned the right to. Not really appreciating the fact that this is probably just going to make you turn into another version of me, or we're never going to have this relationship, because I've not come to that point of self-awareness yet, so I'm going to carry on doing this, and I'm not going to have the relationships. I'm not even aware that I'm not having the relationships that I really want, because this is the way that I believe I should be talking. Down to our tonality. Let's give you an idea of why tonality is important. Let me ask you this question. What do you mean by that? Straightforward enough question when we're having a conversation with someone, we're not quite sure what they mean. What do you mean by that? We might just turn up a little bit at the end. Softer voice if we're in kind of close proximity. Now, if we just changed our tonality and put the emphasis on one of these words, just for a second, we might notice the difference in how you hear me asking you this question. What do you mean by that? Now, depending on your current mood states, you might not take that question very well. And all I've done is emphasize one word. What do you mean by that? You might say, well, what do you mean? What do I mean by that? What's that kind of a question to ask someone? And we might start to get into a bit of an argument. All based upon my tonality and how you received or perceived me asking you one question. Two different outcomes from one question, and now we're having an argument. And when we have arguments with people sometimes, we say things like, well, that's not what I meant. Now the trouble is, in this situation, how is someone supposed to know what you meant? They are not you. How can you possibly know what someone else meant You can assume what someone meant. You can draw your own conclusions without actually asking them. But if only there was a way of actually finding out what someone meant. If we just hark back to one of the first slides when I said that communication is a dialogue. Communication is a dialogue. Whose fault is it if there's been some kind of misunderstanding? Well, both of ours really, the two people involved in this argument. We are both equally culpable and responsible for this misunderstanding because communication is a dialogue. Now, we can try and do ourselves a favour when we're arguing and try and figure out exactly where this misunderstanding started by using a model that we're going to come on to in just a second when we get the wrong end of the stick, because the effect is you don't know where you stand and the cause might just be comprehension. So let's look at this model, the 4 stages of communication, to maybe help us try and figure out how we've got on the wrong end of the stick. Now, the first stage is what you intend to say to someone. Second stage is what you actually say. I'm very mindful of the fact that sometimes my brain doesn't completely sync up with my mouth, and if I'm not paying particular attention to what I'm saying, I know a few times over the past I've had to stop myself. So I'm so sorry. That's not how I meant for it to come out. I'm so sorry. Let me rephrase that. Let me say that again. We're all guilty of it. We're all imperfect human beings. As such, we're all imperfect communicators. It's okay, as long as we are aware that what we actually say is as close to what we intend to say as possible. If not, then what the other person hears might just be what you've actually said. Depending on how well they're listening is going to dictate what the other person thinks you mean. They might assume or come to a conclusion or a judgment on your intention. And now we've got a massive gap between what you intended to say and what the other person thinks you intended to say. So how do we overcome this misunderstanding? Well, we need to discover the other person's intention by asking them and be more mindful of their intentions, because we judge others on what they say, but we do not like being judged on anything except our intentions. Ergo, that's not what I meant to say. How was the other person supposed to know this? Asking someone to clarify what they mean will not harm a relationship. As long as we do it in the right way, as long as we try to achieve that balance of our words, our tonality, and our body language. I think we touched upon this earlier on, but we need to find this balance to make more of an impact when we do ask someone in a conversation, what do you mean by that? So what prevents meaningful connections? Is it a communication blocker, like we talked about when we first played bingo, because someone's always avoiding us or advising us or judging us? Yeah, that might be enough to prevent a connection with that other person. Is it down to poor listening skills? Feel like you're talking to a wall. You're wondering, are they even listening? Some of the questions I asked you on the very first slide when I asked you, well, what's the problem? We'll come on to poor listening skills in a sec. Is it just down to misunderstood intention, the 4 stages model that we've just been through? The reason that we argue is because there is a gap between what we intended to say and what the other person thinks you intended to say. And there's been no clarity because we got a little bit imbalanced between our words, our tonality, and possibly our body language. Or is it perception that is preventing meaningful connections? Time for another game. Lucky little sausages. I think there's just one more game left to play after this. Or if you're really hating these games so far, there's only one more game after this. The perceptual positions game. For when it comes to arguing with other people. Now, a few times over the years, friends have called me. They said, oh, I've just gone for a walk. I've just had a massive row. I'm like, okay, what happened? Well, I said this and she said this and I think this and she thinks that. I said, okay. How are we going to resolve this little pickle? So what I want you to do is think about the last good argument that you had, the last row you had with someone, if that's at work, at home, with a friend, whoever. And I want you to think about this argument. And where you're sat right now, I just want you to imagine that you're just kind of lifting out of your chair like some kind of spirit, and you're just going to pop yourself behind the person on the left, because that's you in this argument. This is our first position. All you're going to do is step into your shoes, and you're going to play out this argument again, and you're just going to observe as you are now, inside your body, looking through your eyes. We're going to play out this argument. This is how you saw the argument the first time around. And you're just looking at this other person now. What words are they using? How's their body language? How's their tonality? Is there a strive for clarity? Are there any blocks to communication? This is a nice and easy one to remember how to do, or to be able to do, because this is how you saw the argument the first time round. This is just recalling the story. Cool. You're going to jump out of your shoes. And now I just want you to walk around and now just stand behind the person that you are arguing with. And now you're just going to step into their shoes. And we're going to play this argument again from the top. But now you are watching this argument happen through the eyes of the other person that you are having this row with. And now you're watching yourself. What words are you using? How's that making you feel right now? How's the tone? How's the body language? Is the person you're now looking at trying for clarity, to understand, to appreciate the other person? How are you feeling? Now that you're looking at the same argument through a slightly different perspective than your own. Feeling any different yet? Okay, now you're just going to pop out of the second person's shoes. And you're going to stand in between these two people and just take a few steps back. So now you're about, let's say, 10, 12 feet away. And we're just going to rewind the tape and you're going to watch this argument, but this time you're an independent observer. You don't have a side in this fight. You've got no idea who these two people are. You just happen to be walking kind of onto this scene almost like you've walked onto a film set. And you've just stopped because these two people are having a massive row, and it's fascinating to watch other people have a row. It's nothing to do with you. It's entertainment, free entertainment. Now watch this argument play out. You don't know either of these two people. Doesn't matter who's right and wrong. But how is the body language? How is the tone? What are the words? Are either party putting up blocks to communication? Is there a push for clarity, to appreciate, to understand each other? You can base yourself in the facts here. What are the actual facts? Let's take the feelings away of this situation. What are the facts? What would you conclude if I ask you now, right, give me some analysis. How would you evaluate the situation? What would your honest evaluation be? Because this is what I do with friends when they have a big row. And it's just a case of trying to see the argument from the other person's perspective, and then also trying to see it from an objective perspective. Now, when we try to change our perceptual positions and we try to adopt the perspective of someone else in an argument, obviously our default mode is always going to be the first position, because that's how we saw the argument the first time around. That's how you saw it, that's how you heard it, that's how you feel about it from your point of view. Just because you believe something is true, though, doesn't make it actually true. And the idea of adopting the second position, adopting the other person's perspective is that it helps us to relate, to connect, to understand, to ask better questions. You can agree to disagree with someone in an argument, but just spend a second or two trying to understand. Put in that effort if you want that relationship to be stronger, to build those foundations through our communication. It all just takes a little bit of effort. And the third perspective, the third position, the observer, the grounded, objective position, we can feel how the situation appears to someone not involved based on the facts. Do we spend our lives caught up in feelings and the heat of the moment? Yeah, we do. But we all see the world in the same way, right? So everyone's going to react like that. Do they? Do they? Do we all see the world in the same way? A lot of people seem to think that an activating event, something that happens to them, directly leads to a consequence, or an action which leads to a consequence. You get slapped around the face, you slap them back. Someone calls you a nasty name, you call them a nasty name back. A equals C. That doesn't make a huge amount of sense because it doesn't allow for our beliefs to play a part in this little equation. Our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings, what we think the right course of action is. Everything that happens to us, we have to process based upon our beliefs, based upon how we think is the best way to deal in this situation. That is going to cause us to act. That action is going to cause a consequence. Now, we all see the world in completely different ways. So how we respond to one situation might bring about two different consequences based on the person that you're asking. Let's give you an example. One of my clients a year or so ago said that he gets so angry in traffic. He gets anxious that someone's going to accidentally bump into him because we're going at a snail's pace and just doesn't like it. And there's always traffic at rush hour and really winds him up. And I said, that's interesting. If I could self-disclose for a second, since we're just kind of openly talking, traffic has never really bothered me. If I'm not in a particular rush to get somewhere, if I'm just on my way home and there's traffic, well, I appreciate that traffic happens. It's okay. There's not really much you can do about it sometimes, so I just turn up my music and just sing along a bit more to whatever's on my Spotify. If it's Usher, Van Morrison, whatever, I'll just carry on singing away and eventually I'll get home. Now you could see him in the car in front of me. He's sat there honking his horn, screaming, shouting. And you see me in the car behind just bopping along, singing a few songs. Not a care in the world because we've got different beliefs regarding the same activating events, which has given us two different consequences. So no, we don't all see the world in the same way. But based on our beliefs, what about the same situation, but in the same person's mind, can we get two consequences based purely on our beliefs? Imagine your partner's gone out for the evening and they've been gone a few hours. And so you send them a text. Hey, hope you're having a good time. Let me know if you need picking up, something like that. And half an hour goes by. You don't hear from them. Then an hour goes by. Still nothing. 2 hours have gone by since you've texted this person. What are you thinking right now? They're cheating. Quite a big assumption to make. What are you going to do about this assumption? You going to do anything about it? How do you believe you're going to process this activating event of not having your text replied to? They're cheating on me. When we have these thoughts come into our head all the time. Some are helpful, some are not. But if it's something as serious as they're probably cheating on me, maybe we just stop for a second and just put this thought on trial and just be a little bit more mindful to try and reach the most likely outcome. And we can do this by presenting supporting arguments. Well, apart from this thought that they might be cheating on me, I don't really have any. Okay? Is that it for supporting arguments? Yes, just a thought. Fab. Okay, how about some opposing arguments? Well, I guess that their phone might not have any signal, their battery may have died, they might just be hanging out with their friends and haven't looked at their phone for a while. Have they ever cheated on you before? No. Are they particularly flirty around other people? No. Okay. So hang on, so that's 5 opposing arguments to 0 supporting arguments. In a court of law, I would argue that's reasonable evidence to suggest as a verdict that that thought is just an unhelpful thought that's come into your brain. But the best course of action to take is no action. And then you're still in a relationship. And then your partner comes home and says, I just forgot to charge my phone before I went out, didn't I? And you're sat there, ha ha ha, yeah, no, that happens. Never happens, does it? Now, based upon your beliefs, that could be a happy outcome. Or based upon your beliefs, you could have reacted to that unhelpful thought that came into your brain when you've not heard from them for 2 hours and text them after 2 hours, say, well, you clearly don't like me anymore, so you're done. That's it. I don't ever want to see you again. Based upon reacting to the same situation. And now we've got the consequence of you're now single. Purely based upon a thought that came into your head, based upon an activating event that you've processed, you've decided to react to it, and now you've got a consequence. We've got now 2 different consequences to the same activating event that have happened inside the same person's head, based upon our reaction rather than responding. Now, you know as well as I do that there are people in our lives that always react to situations, always jump the gun, always making assumptions, conclusions and judgments. And how often do you want these people in your lives? And how often have you spoken to these people? Well, they've called you up and said, I wish I hadn't have said that. Or I wish I hadn't have done that. I'm in trouble. You don't want these people in your life that much. There's no consistency. They're a bit up and down. They live off their feelings. They're not grounded. They're not based in facts. They never respond to situations. They're always reacting. Because we can only see the world through our own eyes. You can only see the world through your eyes, your point of view, from your perspective, based upon your beliefs and how you think you should deal with the world. But we just need to be a little bit more mindful of the fact that you get to choose how to respond to life in every situation. If it is an unhelpful thought that comes into your brain, stop. Put that thought on trial for a minute. Opposing arguments, supporting arguments. Then we can respond in a much more mature, responsible, grounded way and get completely different consequences to the things that we used to get when we jump the gun, would make assumptions, make conclusions, put judgments on people. Who's that actually serving by doing that? No one. Because if we all want connection and you spend all of your life making assumptions, judgments, conclusions, people aren't going to find value in you because you live off your feelings too much. There's no consistency. There's no consistency to build communication and build these foundations on. You get to choose how you respond to life. And if you start responding more than reacting, we can start to build better relationships. When you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. If you listen, you may learn something. Now, Carl Rogers proposed these levels of intimacy in romantic relationships so we can achieve intimacy with romantic partners. And I've always wondered since I first read about this idea, this theory, and we should pick apart theories. We shouldn't take everything we see and hear as gospel. Question these things. Be mindful of different perspective and different ideas and critique things. Get to the truth. But I wonder, these levels of intimacy in relationships, are they applicable to friendships, to work relationships? Maybe. Let's have a look. The first stage that we need to conquer is attraction when it comes to romantic partners. What draws us together? You like the look of someone from across the bar, and they like the look of you. Then there needs to be a connection. We need to accept each other, and then we can start to add value and trust. Then we might get to the power struggle where if you think you're more important than me, or I think I'm more important than you, and I'm always being a bit condescending, a bit patronising, always interrupting, we might not get past that. But if we can, and we realise that we're equal, and we're in this together, no one is more important than the other, then we can start to accept each other's imperfections and prove our trustworthiness, our consistency, which brings about commitment, which brings about intimacy in romantic relationships. Which is what we all want, right? We all want to settle down, well, most of us want to settle down with someone and have that relationship that we've only ever seen in the movies. And we wonder what stops us. And I've figured out what stops us. Achieving intimacy in romantic relationships is the same thing that stops us from achieving deep, meaningful connections with friends and better relationships with people that we work with. It's the power struggle. If there's a hierarchy between two people, that relationship is never going to go any further. Because one person is feeling like they're being talked down to, they're being condescended to, they're being patronised, they're always being interrupted, and it's not worth your time. You've tried to have a relationship with this person, they've put in this power struggle because they feel there's a hierarchy. You may have noticed this in the past in relationships, at work, at home, with friends. If someone genuinely feels that they're more important, our effort in that relationship is just going to slowly, gradually go. Our foundations are just going to start to crack a bit more and a bit more, and every time they text us and we just look at our phone and put it back down again, those relationships disappear. We'll never have good relationships with those people. Because there are distractions to listening. We might be formulating a reply. We might want to sound really intelligent to the person that we're talking to. So before we've even had a chance to open our mouths and express and articulate what we want to say, we've stopped listening to them. We're now in preparation mode for what's about to come out of our mouth, hoping that our brain is synced up to our mouths and we're going to say what we actually intend to say to sound really intelligent to someone, whereas we're not even giving them the courtesy of actually listening to what they're saying. We might be evaluating what's being said. I know personally, if I'm watching TV and a politician comes on, as I'm about to throw my shoe at the TV before they've even opened their mouth sometimes, we need to give people the opportunity to talk and not evaluate what's being said when they're still saying it, because we're not actually listening. Our minds might be elsewhere sometimes when people are talking to us. I know in particular, back when I used to smoke cigarettes, that if anyone grabbed me on my way out for a cigarette, my brain would just be stood in the doorway saying, "Why is this giant cigarette talking to us?" Another part of my brain said, "I don't know, but I'd like to go for a cigarette." And the other part of my brain would go, "Yeah, me too." And as this conversation's going on in my head about just wanting a cigarette, someone's mouth I can see is moving. I'm not listening because I'm preoccupied. We need to become self-aware of these distractions. We might be distracted by a like for that other person if they kind of take your eye a little bit. If they're the prettiest person in your office, you might just get a little bit lost in their eyes sometimes. But I'm so sorry, can you repeat that? What about if we dislike someone? Again, we might be looking at someone from the opposite end of the spectrum. I absolutely hate you. Whatever you're talking about right now, I couldn't care less. Or another distraction might be that we sympathise a bit too much. Obviously, there is a time and a place for sympathy, but in general communications, not so much. Because it doesn't achieve anything. You remember earlier on when I was talking about the 3 kind of pillars of help that we look to when we're trapped in a hole? And therapy does about just the same as talking to a dog or a stuffed animal sometimes. It doesn't actually get us anywhere into solving our issues. We're just kind of getting it off our chest. And sympathising and just saying, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's a bit of a distraction to our listening because we're just more preoccupied. We're sounding like we are sorry for that other person, but as opposed to sympathy, like I said, there is a time and a place for it. We want to be pushing more towards empathy. I'll get rid of that internal self-dialogue in a second. And we can achieve empathy through effective listening, but there are signs of ineffective listening. One last game, I promise. And then we'll do a little summary of everything we've talked about. Signs of ineffective listening game. Very, very, very similar to the bingo that we played first off. I'm going to put a few different words and ideas and phrases on the board. And you're going to tell me if you've experienced them in the past and what effect it has had on that relationship. Or again, if you've been a perpetrator, if you're guilty of a sign of ineffective listening. Again, you're not a bad person. All I want you to think about and just become a little bit mindful of is the effects of ineffective listening and what it can have on your relationships. Some belters in there. Doodling is quite a funny one. I know when I've been in staff meetings in the past and it's just a monologue and it's a bit of a monotone monologue in particular, I just sit there and doodle on my little notepad because I'm bored and I'm not listening. I'm bored because there's no effort to communicate. There's no dialogue. It's all monologue. So you've lost me. I'm not interested. That's how we get bored when people are talking to us. If lack of eye contact. Now this is a tricky one because people that tend to be a little bit more introverted don't make much eye contact at all. They don't have the self-confidence to make a lot of eye contact. They might make a little bit and look away again. As opposed to people that tend to be a little bit more extroverted, a bit more confident. If that's genuine or it's just an act, they will look into your soul when you are talking to them because they feel they have the confidence to do so. The biggest one for me in terms of a sign of ineffective listening is people playing on their phone. It's rude, it's annoying, and you know when you've been talking to people, if you've got kids, partners, whoever, and you're just trying to have a conversation with them, and they're just sat there playing on their phone. What did I ask you earlier on when I asked you what's the problem? Does it feel like you're talking to a wall? Feel like you're not being listened to? Feel like you're bothering people? Or because someone values their phone more than your relationship? They might not, but that's how you're perceiving the situation. You're only going to see the world through your eyes, and you might react to that situation as opposed to responding. We spend more time on our phones than we do talking to other people, talking to all of our online friends because they're more important than the people in front of us. No, they're not. We're on social media for what? Connection. And it's always made me laugh when I've had friends and friends of friends and clients who've had thousands of online friends on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and they'll say, yeah, it's been a bit bored, been a bit lonely. And I think, how the hell can you be bored and lonely when you have thousands of friends? It's impossible. Unless there's no depth to those relationships, it's all just a load of breadth. Now, there are different levels of listening before we get into the good stuff. The bad levels: ignoring, pretending, selective listening. Attentive listening is good, shows that we're actually paying attention. Where we want to be is to be an effective or an active listener, where we're trying to understand and being more mindful of another person's perspective. Similarly to like what we talked about with the perceptual positions, where you put yourself into the first person and then the other person. All of that is based around the idea of just being a bit more mindful to the situations that we find ourselves in. We've covered a little bit of what life coaching is. We've dipped into cognitive behavioural therapy. We've dipped into a bit of mindfulness today without even really realising it. Interesting. Anyways, if you were going to be making notes at all today, this is the time to get your pencil out, because there are some keys to becoming an effective listener. Be attentive. Focus on the other person. An appropriate amount of eye contact, like I mentioned, the difference between introverted people and extroverted people. And please put your phone away. Don't just put it face down on the table. It's just as rude. Don't put it in your pocket, because every time your phone buzzes, the other person might be thinking, they're probably thinking about who's messaging them right now. Put your phone out of sight, out of mind, if you can, when you're having a conversation with someone. If you want to build a relationship with this person, if you want to prove that you're a better listener, we all think we're really good listeners. If you've ever gotten your phone out and put it face down, there is room for improvement. The idea is to put the speaker at ease. Encourage them to speak freely. And we can do this by being patient, not interrupting, allowing them to finish. We talked earlier on about hierarchy and equality, and how annoying is it when someone is constantly interrupting us? And you have the option, just here, of just letting someone talk before you assert your dominance, and you can realise that actually, we have equality here. I'm going to let you talk, and then hopefully you're going to allow me to talk. And that is going to build our relationship up a little bit. Try to avoid personal prejudice. We listen without judgment. We remain impartial. We let people talk. And we try to empathise. We try to understand their perspective, where they're coming from, why they're saying and feeling the things that they are. You can identify the key messages. You don't have to look out for every single nuance every time they scratch their nose or fidget a tiny bit and think, well, that might mean something. But get a main idea of what someone is saying to you to try to help you empathise with them. Listen to the tone. Be mindful of their volume and their tone. Check out their body language. Pay attention to that. And also reflect, clarify, summarise. You can do this by restating or paraphrasing, which we'll go through in just a second. But when we make a bit of an effort, it shows that we're trying to understand their position, and this can help us ask better questions. Tell me more about that. Or, I'm sensing you're feeling a little apprehensive. Did you hear how we toned up at the end to show that we're actually interested in building a relationship? What do you mean by that? A tip for dealing with closed off people, and like I said, I've worked on building sites for a long time. I've dealt with my fair share of closed off people. Basic body language cues, arms folded, legs folded, one word answers, like getting blood out of a turnip or a stone, whichever analogy, metaphor you prefer. And it's the same sometimes with my friends. It's really annoying because I still see me and my friends as teenagers, but a few of my friends now have teenagers, and that's really sad. However, pre-lockdown, I'd often pop round to see my friends. I'd say, how's the kid? They'd say, all they do is play on their Xbox. Never get a word out of them, even during dinner. I'm like, oh, okay. Do you mind if I go and say hello quick? And they're like, yeah, go for it. Best of luck, though, if you get more than a few mumbles and grunts out of them when they're playing their game. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. It's okay, priorities. If they're prioritising their game over saying hello to their dad's mate, I get that. I'm probably quite old and boring in their eyes. So, But anyways, so I'll go up and I'll see a mate's 15-year-old son. I'll say, hey man, how you getting on? I'll say, yeah, fine. Fine? Yeah, it's okay. Just okay? Yeah. How's school going? Not bad. Just not bad. Any room for improvement? Could it be a bit better? Well, yeah. Well, one of the teachers doesn't really like me that much. One of your teachers doesn't like you that much? Yeah. Why do you think that might be? Well, and all we're doing here is just mirroring a few key words just to get them out of these little one-word responses and one-word replies, and maybe paraphrasing, even if we're just reflecting the essence. So let me just get this right. So what you're saying is this because of this and this. Is that what you're saying? Is that right? And we're not going to build the greatest relationship in the world by having one conversation, but it is showing effort. It's showing that other person we're trying to build this relationship. And they might appreciate that. And the more we try these little things, like just mirroring the odd little word every now and again, reflecting what they're trying to say, paraphrasing, it's showing that we're putting in the effort. And hopefully After a bit of trying, they might start to appreciate this and understand where we're coming from and start putting that same level of effort in to make this communication more of a dialogue and less of a monologue, and aim to appreciate and understand each other more and build that more meaningful, deeper connection. But when we are talking to people, you know the greatest gift you can give anyone? It's to listen. Don't interrupt. There's no hierarchies, no blocks to communication, no signs of ineffective listening. I think it's just a massive coincidence that the words listen and silence are anagrams of each other. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it is. I don't know. But trust me, you will notice the difference in relationships when people are talking and you keep absolutely quiet until they finish talking. You'll notice a huge difference. To summarise all the things that we've been through today, if we don't have any communication blocks in our relationships, this can make us better listeners, which can mean we can understand people better, they can understand us better. This builds trust in a relationship and means we can be more authentic and more congruent, more consistent versions of ourselves, which gives us more conversational depth, less breadth, bringing about more meaningful connections where we can add value into the lives of others and ultimately bring about fulfillment. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Good. One last thing. Matt Haig, author of books like Reasons to Stay Alive, which changed my life, and his new book, The Midnight Library, and various others. Read them if you get the chance to. His quote is that you have no control over who people think you are. So don't worry about that. If they want to hate some fictional version of you that exists in their minds, let them. Don't drain yourself winning over people you can't win over. Keep your cup full and go where the kindness is. And the reason I put this quote in is because A, he's one of my favourite authors, and B, it backs up a lot of what we were saying. If they have or they hate some fictional version of you from their perspective, how's their awareness going? Don't drain yourself with people you can't win over. Why can't you win over certain people? Is it because they're closed off? There's a hierarchy. They haven't become as self-aware as you are. We always need to be working on ourselves if we are ever going to get to where we want to be. And it's the same with our relationships, because the quality of life is based on the quality of our relationships. Those are all of my 2 a.m. people that I mentioned earlier on. I love them all dearly. They are worth more to me than any amount of money I could ever wish to have in my bank account, what I used to wish to have in my bank account. I appreciate that we all want connection, but it does require work. That's pretty much it from me. If you want any more information, by all means check out nicholasmithcoaching.com, info@nicholasmithcoaching.com. And just one last, very, very, very last point. You might be thinking, don't know if it's going to do any help at all or anything like that. It's a bit wussy getting help from someone. I understand. And you're not the first person that said it. And you're entitled to your thoughts and your beliefs. And as long as they're serving you and helping you become a more grounded, mature, self-aware person, there's nothing much else I can do. Apart from highlight 1 or 2 things. 1 in 4 adults have a mental illness. 1 in 4. 38% of all ill health is caused by mental illness. 1 in 3 families include someone with a mental health problem. Mental health has the same effects on life expectancy as smoking. People with mental health problems are 3 times more likely to develop physical conditions. And the final point, which hits home more for me now that a lot of my close friends are having kids, is that at least 1/3 of children whose parents have mental health problems will experience mental ill health.
We need to talk. Thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to get in touch, even if it's just for a chat or even a free consultation, dip your toe in. We need to talk. Thank you so much.